As you see, I dressed up a little bit for this. I had a bit of a wardrobe malfunction this morning when I opened up my bag. I didn't get in last night until about midnight, and there was lotion all over it was a really nice pink suit. So, moving on. All right, so now that I know you're all alive, there's something I want you to just, before we jump into this, just pay very close attention to this really simple phrase. I will not advertise the nature of my job, nor seek credit for what I've done. And I say that not to give any sort of discredit to anybody from my community that I love so much, my former community as a SEAL. And in this, you'll see why. I think that it's been overstated a little bit about what my community represents, and that phrase comes from what's called the Navy SEAL ethos. I was a young SEAL in 2003, and a bunch of senior members of my community thought it would be a good idea to put something to text that, as a young SEAL and even older SEALs, something we could relate to and reference, and so we know what the community that we represent embodies. And to be quite honest with you, again, I was a 23-year-old SEAL after my first deployment, and I very vividly remember laughing at the idea of that I, or any senior member from my organization, would be advertising the nature of our job, okay? And again, that's not at all to give discredit for those who've written books and taken part in movies, because I know the genesis of what the purpose of those pieces of literature and video and so forth. It's to motivate and inspire. And so there is a lot to be said about what the community that I represent right now has to offer. And it's been, in my opinion, been a little bit great or poorly delivered. So fortunately, over the last couple years, really, so I spent 11 years as a SEAL. Over those years, and then hence after the 3 years since I've been out, I've learned a lot about, really in hindsight, what my community is about. And I get asked an awful lot. I spend a fair amount of time standing in front of crowds like this, in professional organizations, in business, and so forth, trying to impart that SEAL methodology into that business world or that sports world. And typically, well, every time really, I interview people. They think they're interviewing me, but I actually interview them. And I do turn people away because a lot of times they just don't quite get it, and that's okay. But I get asked all the time, and I think I woke up this morning with 6 messages about me going to speak to an organization, and it's usually centered around motivation and so forth. And I pick up the phone, I make the phone call and begin interviewing these people, coaches and executives and so forth, and I very quickly create a very uncomfortable silence on the other side of the phone because they say, I want you to come in and motivate and give my guys grit and toughen them up. And I just very simply say, that's not possible, that's not what I do. And it's very confusing because my name gets passed along from people that I've worked with, and they say, hey, you should have this person come in and work with your organization because there is a benefit to be had. And then I begin to explain to them. And this is where this is going, because I'm going to explain to you what my community would be proud for me to stand up to you all and share with what we do, in my opinion, not so very humble, do better than anybody else in this world, okay? But before I do that, I want you to understand, again, and this is not to discredit anybody, but to understand that they're a little bit off target, in my opinion, and I mean that respectfully. The genesis of my community, and any special forces community for that matter, is based on attrition. That is to make it so very difficult that people quit. Okay, so if someone wants me to come in and motivate and implement the SEAL methodology in their sports franchise or their business world, first question I say, are you willing to lose 85% of your population? Certainly they're not. That would be really bad business. And I know a lot of people would say, well, I get it, like that's not really the idea we're trying to do. We're trying to just infuse some of that methodology. But there's this misinterpretation that I run around the world, whether it be at the gas station, at a stoplight, right? Everything is furious and frantic in my world, and that's not true at all. Okay, I would say that I'm fairly cerebral, despite the tattoos maybe, right? But the point is that I understand what they're trying to get out of me, but they first must understand what I'm trying to put into them, okay? And there's three things, and I can categorize this into a million things, but there's three things above all else that I've categorized that I think that we do, I believe that we do better than anybody else. Okay, it's not proprietary to the SEAL community, but it is very much proprietary to success. We can loosely define success as something that's predictable, that's reliable, that's reproducible, and that it also, in my opinion, can be taught. If it can't be taught, what's the value? Right? We can't pass it on. Okay, so three things. The first one is purpose. Okay, my idea of purpose is not, well, I really want this pair of shoes. A week later, I wish I hadn't bought them. Okay, or I'm really motivated to start this new training program at New Year's. And then a week later, I'm just like, man, I just really don't want to do this. That's not purpose, okay? Every individual that comes into the SEAL training, BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, is that not everyone has purpose that will facilitate almost guaranteed success. And so BUDS is not SEAL training. The training is so very difficult that it deselects to get to the individuals that the community is willing to invest their time and money and emotion and love into. And that's what the corporate world that does things, their corporate business that do that very, very well. Okay, there are sports franchises, fortunately, I've seen that do that really, really well. Because talent all being equal, motivation is garbage. Motivation is lacking purpose. Okay, just like hope. I don't put I would never bet on hope in Vegas. I will bet on having a purpose, right? A driven purpose. My purpose, like anyone else, those of us that made it through, it's who we are. It's what we are. It's what we've been exposed to. It's very deep in who we are. Is it from our parents? Is it from our environment? Right? Is it a combination of everything? Certainly, it's all of those sort of things. But if you're lacking purpose, we're wasting our time. And that's what I say to a lot of people. Now, we may not have discovered our purpose, like really what makes us purpose. And I'll get to something here in a minute because that purpose can change. But if you're lacking purpose, we're lacking direction, right? It's physics, okay? There's a difference between a vector, right, and a direction. So find your purpose. And all of the individuals in my community that make it through that training are selected and go into training have a purpose, a real purpose. And when it's tested, what do we fall onto? Number 2 is process. Okay, and this is really where the rubber meets the road in our community, in the SEAL community, and in success. When I say something's proprietary, success has a purpose and it has a process. It's finite. It's being tested. When things get terrible, it's reinforced by our purpose. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what you want to do. If you're really passionate, truly passionate about something, create a plan. And make sure that, because that plan is going to get tested. Okay, make sure that plan is finite. And in my community, what I say is a little bit proprietary is the way that which it's tested. It's violent, it's dangerous, and many, many times it's awful. Right? Stress reinforces, all right, or basically discredits that purpose. When stress gets way, way up here, we question whether or not we want to be there. And what do we have to fall onto? We fall onto that process. So in the tactical community, the law enforcement community, the business world, the sports, it's repetition with purpose. It's repetition with purpose under great stress. And that is what people have a hard time dealing with, is like, listen, if you really want to be successful, because we get so focused on the result. That's all we see. We forget what it takes to get there. Like we think that success is happenstantial, right? A successful baseball player, football player, executive, whatever it is. We're like, well, certainly, like it's God-given talent. Certainly, that's a component of it. But let's not discredit all the really super unsexy hard work that it took to get there, right? We see sport as home runs and touchdowns, and see SEALs as this amazing, superhuman, whatever. But I'm here to tell you, I spent 308 days a year for 10 years away from my family and friends, training and deploying. That's what I averaged over 10 years. A lot. I was gone a lot. I have 3 million frequent flyer miles. And that's not counting the military air travel. Okay, so purpose, we have process. 3, which I think is the glue to it all. And by no means am I a romance novelist or anything like that. It's love, right? I'm not here to beat my chest. I'm certainly not, that's not my type. I spent a lot of my time being angry with my world, and it was exhausting. It was really exhausting. And what I have found through those times, when my purpose got really, really tested, and that process got a little bit sketchy because friends of mine died, a close friend of mine just died. When those things are tested, your purpose and your process are tested, we have love to fall on. Love is what supports it. Love is what pulls us up when things are terrible. And if you're lacking that, then we're spinning our wheels a lot with purpose in our process. But here's the unique side is like if we're so rigid on our purpose and our process, and even our love, are willing to love ourselves and others and our country and our brothers and so forth, the other side of love is humanity, right? It's very unforgiving. It's always changing. And if we're so rigid and unwilling to bend and manipulate our process and purpose, then also understand this. What gets us there being success, won't always keep us there. Okay, what gets us to be successful as a young SEAL, young businessman, young athlete, has got to evolve. It has to evolve, and we have to understand that when things get bad, we're not going to throw our process out the window. We just may have to evolve it. Okay, in 2007 of February, my son was born, and I will say that it's the most important thing in my life. He, by far, is the most important thing in my life. Nothing's even close. I have a new purpose. Being a parent wasn't scary because I knew that my parents raised me a certain way. I have my process. Right? I know what it takes to raise a good person. So I had that. A year later, I was out of the Navy. Or I'm sorry. I exited the Navy in 2013. My son wasn't. He was born in 2007. I understand the math difference here. So, a year out of the Navy, I wanted to spend more time with my son. I get out, and that's why I got out. Primarily was why I got out. I was a little bit lost, right? The community that I loved and I gave my life to, it gave me a lot of direction. Maybe some would even say it gave me a little bit of identity. I needed to find a new purpose. So, fast forward a little bit, my business partner and I, best friend, he's the closest thing I have family who's not family. I was a strength coach prior coming into the Navy, and I started working with young athletes to help them develop as a young, good person, not just an athlete. And it gave me a lot of purpose, right? Then what's the next step? Process. I worked my tail off of making sure I gave them everything that I give the professional athletes that I work with. Kids deserve it, right? Then you fast forward a year later. Don't get me wrong, I loved what I do. I was loving what I was doing, but I still wasn't being fulfilled. One of my closest friends is Morgan Luttrell, and I was in his wedding, sitting across from him at dinner, and he goes, "Hey, listen, like happenstantially, I guess maybe, there's a big naval hospital in Virginia Beach where I live, and I was getting a lot of wounded veterans that I was working with pro bono happily." And getting a lot of really good positive results working with them, a lot of catastrophic injury. And Morgan was sitting across from me and said, "Hey, I got some veterans I want you to take a look at and take care of." And without question, yes. And so it was a business decision, but it was an emotional decision. And when my business partner and I started receiving these catastrophically wounded veterans, it gave me purpose. But more importantly, it's the mechanism of how I got purpose. A new purpose. I realized, because the majority of these men and women that we receive were from Special Forces community, the Marine Corps, Navy, Army, and so forth. And like me, that community gave them some identity, a lot of identity, and that was removed because of injury. It wasn't under their terms. I left under my own terms. And being able to take these individuals and help them, not create it for them, help them find purpose. I can tell you there's nothing in the world I love more than that other than my son. Because I am able to work with them, my business partner, my employees, my staff. I know they're mine, but they're our team, just like what I came from. The value of giving somebody, helping somebody find purpose. So again, we can talk about purpose, process, and love, right, in what we do in ourselves. But when you are able to give that to somebody else, there is nothing in this world better. Nothing. And if you can help them find purpose, you can help them find a process, not creating it for them, you're going to see a love, especially that bond, because for those of you that aren't veterans, this is not me saying that you can ever experience that within the veteran community, but something that you hold dear and love, family and your friends, right? When a family member or friend is in need, that's what we do. We envelop them in our tribe. So above all else, there is nothing that my community, my former community, the community that I love, does better than anybody else in the world. Find a purpose. And when you find that purpose, you spend every day focusing on it. If it changes, change with it. And that changes through that process. It's going to get tough, it's going to get tested, and it's going to get challenged. And when it does, the only thing we've got is love. Thank you.